The summer heat shimmered across the dusty plains of Wyoming Territory, as Tessa Adams stared at the worn leather-bound journal clutched in her trembling hands. The pages filled with sketches of impossible dreams that her family had ridiculed just hours before at the dinner table. It was 1878, and women weren't supposed to dream of running their own businesses or owning land without a husband, especially not headstrong 19-year-old daughters of struggling cattle ranchers. Tessa. Her mother's voice cut through the still afternoon air. Stop dawdling and come help with these preserves. Your father will be back soon. Tucking the journal into the pocket of her faded blue dress, Tessa wiped away a stray tear and headed back toward the modest cabin she'd called home all her life. The Adams family ranch had once been prosperous, but 3 years of drought and her father's stubborn refusal to change his ways had left them clinging to the edge of ruin. "Coming, mother," she called, pausing to gaze at the distant mountains that seemed to promise something more than this life of constant struggle and disappointment. Martha Adams stood at the wooden table, her hands stained purple from the berries she'd been preserving all morning. Though only 42 years of harsh prairie living had etched deep lines around her eyes and mouth. "There you are. Your sister finished her chores an hour ago." "I'm sorry," Tessa said automatically, reaching for an apron. "I was just daydreaming again," her mother finished with a weary sigh. "Lord help me, girl, when will you get your head out of the clouds? Your father had another offer from Henry Wilson today. At 35, he's a good match, established, respectable." Tessa's stomach turned. Henry Wilson was the local mercantile owner, balding, portly, and known for his wandering hands whenever wives sent their daughters to his store unaccompanied. "I won't marry Henry Wilson," Tessa said firmly, tying the apron strings with more force than necessary. "Or any man who doesn't see me as more than a cook and mother for his children." Martha slammed a jar down harder than necessary. "And what else should a woman aspire to be? Your father and I have indulged your fanciful notions for too long. Drawing pictures of storefronts and ranches like you're some kind of businessman." She shook her head. "It's time to grow up, Tessa. Women don't own businesses. They don't build empires. They support the men who do." "That's not true," Tessa argued, the words bursting forth before she could stop them. "In Denver, there's a woman who owns her own dress shop, and in Cheyenne, enough." Her mother's voice cracked like a whip. "Those women are exceptions or widows or worse. A respectable girl knows her place." The sound of hoofbeats interrupted their familiar argument. Through the window, Tessa could see her father's weathered form dismounting from his horse. But he wasn't alone. A tall stranger rode beside him, his broad-shouldered silhouette outlined against the setting sun. "We have company," Martha hissed, hastily wiping her hands. "Fix your hair quickly." Tessa untied her apron and smoothed her dress, instinctively reaching up to tuck loose strands of chestnut hair back into place. Through the window, she caught a glimpse of the stranger, tall and lean, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly beneath his hat. Unlike her father's hunched, defeated posture, the stranger sat his horse with easy confidence. The door swung open and Tessa's father, Walter Adams, stepped inside, removing his hat. "Martha, Tessa, we have a visitor. This is Isaac Blackburn. He's looking to buy cattle for a new ranch he's starting up north. I've invited him to stay for supper." The stranger ducked his head to enter the low doorway, removing his hat to reveal eyes the color of a summer storm, not quite blue, not quite gray. When those eyes met Tessa's, something electric passed between them, so tangible she almost took a step back. "Madam," he nodded to Martha before turning to Tessa. "Miss Adams." His voice was deep and smooth like honey over gravel, with a slight accent she couldn't place. Not local, certainly. Mr. Blackburn will be staying in the area for a few weeks, her father explained, hanging his hat on the peg by the door. The miller's old place is being fixed up for him. Tessa's eyebrows rose in surprise. The Millers had abandoned their homestead last winter after frost killed their crops. The place was little more than a tumble-down shack now. "You're staying there." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Isaac Blackburn's mouth curved into a smile that transformed his serious face. "It needs work, but I've slept under worse than a leaky roof. I've been on the trail for 2 years. Any roof feels like luxury." "Mr. Blackburn's from Texas originally," her father added, settling heavily into his chair. "Fought in the war, then worked cattle drives up from Mexico. He's got ambitious plans." "Always have," Isaac agreed, those storm cloud eyes still on Tessa. "A man needs dreams to keep moving forward." Something about the way he said the word dreams made Tessa's heart flutter against her ribs like a trapped bird. She turned away, busying herself with setting an extra place at the table, aware of his gaze following her movements. By the time Tessa's younger sister Grace and older brother William had joined them, and the family sat down to the simple meal of stew and cornbread, Tessa had learned that Isaac Blackburn was 26, had been orphaned young, fought for the Confederacy despite having mixed feelings about the cause, and had worked his way north over the past decade, saving every penny toward his own land. "So what brings you to our corner of nowhere, Mr. Blackburn?" William asked, reaching for another piece of cornbread. At 22, he was the image of their father in his younger days, before disappointment and hard living had bent his shoulders and dimmed his eyes. "Land's cheaper here," Isaac replied simply, "and fewer people. I've had my fill of crowds." "Not much opportunity either," Walter grunted. 3 bad years in a row have broken better men than me." "Walter," Martha warned quietly, glancing at their guest, but Isaac seemed unfazed. "Hard times come and go. It's about adapting. I've been watching what works further north: mixed farming instead of just cattle, some sheep for wool when beef prices drop, planting drought-resistant crops." Tessa looked up from her plate, suddenly interested. These were the very ideas she'd suggested to her father last spring, only to be dismissed with a lecture about how things had always been done. "Sheep," Walter scoffed. "Cattle ranchers don't mix with sheep men." "Maybe that's the problem," Isaac said calmly. "Holding too tight to old ways when the land demands something new." "That's what I've been saying," Tessa interjected, unable to help herself. "If we diversified—" "Tessa," her mother cut her off with a sharp look. "This is men's business." Isaac's gaze shifted to Tessa with new interest. "You have ideas about ranching, Miss Adams?" Before her parents could intervene, Tessa nodded. "I've been reading everything I can find. Agricultural journals from back east. There are new methods." She fancies herself quite the businesswoman. Walter interrupted with an indulgent but dismissive smile. "Always has her nose in some book or scribbling in that journal of hers. Dreams bigger than the sky, this one." The familiar sting of their dismissal burned in Tessa's chest, but she kept her chin up, meeting Isaac's gaze steadily. "Nothing wrong with big dreams," Isaac said quietly, his eyes never leaving hers. "They're what push the frontier forward." "Well, a woman's dreams need to be practical," Martha declared, rising to clear the plates. "Grace, help me with the dishes. Tessa, fetch some coffee for your father and Mr. Blackburn." As Tessa moved to the stove, she felt Isaac watching her, a curious intensity in his gaze that made her skin prickle with awareness. When she returned with the coffee pot, he thanked her with a nod that somehow conveyed more respect than she'd received from any man besides her brother. The conversation turned to cattle prices and grazing rights, topics that would normally have Tessa straining to participate. But tonight, she found herself simply watching Isaac Blackburn, the confident set of his shoulders, the careful consideration he gave before speaking, the way his hands, strong but surprisingly elegant, cradled the coffee mug as if it were fine china. After the men had moved to the porch to smoke and continue their conversation, Martha cornered Tessa in the kitchen. "Don't get any ideas," she warned in a low voice. "That man is focused on building something, not courting a girl with her head in the clouds. Besides, your father has all but promised you to Henry Wilson." "He can promise all he wants," Tessa replied, scrubbing a pot with more vigor than necessary. "I'm not property to be traded." Martha's face softened for a moment. "Oh, Tessa. Life is hard enough without fighting the natural order of things. A woman needs protection in this world." "Maybe I want more than protection," Tessa whispered, but her mother had already turned away, calling for Grace to bring more towels. Later that night, unable to sleep, Tessa slipped outside with her journal. The full moon bathed the prairie in silver light as she settled onto the old stump behind the house, her favorite thinking spot. Opening to a fresh page, she began sketching the layout of a ranch as she imagined it not just cattle, but fields of grain, an orchard, maybe even a small store to sell preserves and wool goods to passing travelers. Quite the artist. The deep voice startled her so badly she nearly fell off the stump. Isaac Blackburn stood a few feet away, his tall frame silhouetted against the night sky. "Mr. Blackburn, I thought you'd gone back to town. Your father offered the barn for the night. My horse needed rest." He gestured to her journal. "May I?" Hesitantly, Tessa handed it over. No one outside her family had ever seen her drawings, her dreams committed to paper. She held her breath as he carefully turned the pages. "These are detailed," he said finally, genuine admiration in his voice. "You've thought this through: irrigation channels here, windbreaks for the orchards, southern exposure for the gardens." He looked up at her. "This isn't idle daydreaming, Miss Adams. This is planning." Something warm unfurled in Tessa's chest at his words. "My family doesn't see it that way." "Most people lack vision," he said simply, returning the journal. "They can only see what is, not what could be." "And you?" she asked, suddenly bold in the moonlight. "What do you see?" His eyes, silver in the moonlight, held hers. "Possibility, always possibility." He paused, then asked, "Why do you stay if they don't support your dreams?" The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her that before. "Where would I go? What would I do? A woman alone." She trailed off, the harsh realities of frontier life hanging unspoken between them. "Fair point," he conceded, "but dreams have a way of finding paths we never considered." He tipped his hat slightly. "Don't let them die, Miss Adams. The world has enough practical people. It's the dreamers who make it worth living in." With that, he turned and walked back toward the barn, leaving Tessa staring after him, her heart racing with something that felt dangerously like hope. The next morning, Isaac was gone before Tessa awoke, but his presence lingered in her thoughts as she went about her chores. Her father mentioned that Isaac would be staying in the area for at least a month, looking to buy cattle and prepare his new property. "Strange fellow," Walter commented over breakfast. "Got his own notions about everything, but he's got cash money and we need the sale." 3 days later, Tessa was in town with her mother and Grace, purchasing supplies at Wilson's Mercantile, when she spotted Isaac across the street at the land office. Without thinking, she finished her purchases quickly and made an excuse about checking on a book order at the small lending library next door. Instead, she found herself crossing the dusty main street, drawn to Isaac like a moth to flame. He was just exiting the land office when he spotted her, his serious face breaking into a smile that transformed him entirely. "Miss Adams," he greeted her, tipping his hat. "A pleasant surprise." "Mr. Blackburn," she returned, suddenly aware of how forward she must appear, approaching him on the street. "I hope you're settling in well." "Getting there," he replied. "Your father's agreed to sell me 20 head to start my herd. I've just finished filing the final paperwork on the Miller property." "Congratulations," she said sincerely. "That's wonderful news." He glanced down the street, then back at her. "I don't suppose you'd have time for a cup of coffee. I'd value your thoughts on something." Tessa knew she should decline. Her mother would be looking for her soon, and being seen taking coffee alone with a man would set tongues wagging. But the earnest look in his eyes, and the tantalizing prospect of a conversation where her thoughts might actually be valued overrode her caution. "I can spare a few minutes," she agreed. The town's small cafe was nearly empty at this hour. They took a table by the window, and after ordering coffee, Isaac produced a folded paper from his pocket. "I've been thinking about your drawings," he said without preamble. "The way you planned the layout of that ranch. I've drafted something similar for my place, but I'm not satisfied with it. Would you mind taking a look?" Surprised and flattered, Tessa accepted the paper. The rough sketch showed the basic outline of the Miller property with proposed additions: a new barn, expanded house, corrals. It was functional but lacked the integrated design she preferred. For the next 15 minutes, she forgot propriety entirely as she discussed water access, crop rotation, and building placement with Isaac. He listened intently, asking questions that showed genuine interest in her opinions, occasionally making notes in the margins of his sketch. "You have a natural understanding of how a ranch should flow," he commented. "Most men I know would have placed the barn for convenience to the house, not thinking about drainage and wind patterns." "I've spent my life watching my father do things the hard way," she admitted. "I can't help but see how they could be better. It's a gift," he said seriously, "to see potential where others see only what exists." Their coffee cups sat empty, and Tessa suddenly realized how much time had passed. "I should go. My mother will be looking for me." As if summoned by her words, the cafe door opened, and Martha Adams entered, her expression shifting from concern to disapproval when she spotted Tessa sitting with Isaac. "There you are," she said tightly. "We've been searching all over. It's time to head home." Isaac stood immediately. "Mrs. Adams, I apologize for keeping your daughter. I was seeking her advice on my property layout. She has quite an eye for design." Martha's expression didn't soften. "How thoughtful of her. Come along, Tessa. Your father is waiting with the wagon." Tessa gathered her shawl, embarrassment burning her cheeks. "Thank you for the coffee, Mr. Blackburn." "The pleasure was mine, Miss Adams," he replied, his eyes conveying something more than the polite words. The ride home was filled with her mother's lecture about propriety and reputation, but Tessa barely heard it. All she could think about was the way Isaac had looked at her, not as a silly girl with impossible dreams, but as a person with valuable insights. Over the next 2 weeks, Tessa saw Isaac several times. He came to the ranch to finalize the cattle purchase, and twice more her family crossed paths with him in town. Each time, he made a point of speaking directly to her, asking her opinion on something or mentioning a book he thought she might enjoy. Each brief encounter left her more intrigued by the quiet, thoughtful man who seemed to see something in her that others missed. Then came the evening that changed everything. A summer storm had rolled in unexpectedly, and Tessa was hurrying to gather the laundry from the line when she heard hoofbeats approaching through the downpour. Isaac appeared, rain-soaked and urgent. "Your father's hurt," he called over the storm. "His horse spooked near my property. I've got him at my place, but he needs tending." Within minutes, Tessa and her mother were in the family wagon with William driving, following Isaac through the pelting rain to the Miller property, now Blackburn's ranch. Despite the circumstances, Tessa couldn't help but notice the changes already visible. The yard had been cleared of debris, the cabin roof patched, and a new corral stood half-finished near the barn. Inside, they found Walter stretched out on a narrow bed, his legs splinted and face pale with pain. "Broke his leg when the horse threw him," Isaac explained as Martha rushed to her husband's side. "I said it as best I could, but he'll need the doctor." "I'll ride for Doc Simmons," William volunteered. "Take my horse," Isaac offered. "He's faster and knows the way to town." As William departed and Martha tended to Walter, Tessa found herself standing awkwardly in the small cabin, suddenly aware of being in Isaac's private space. The interior was sparse but surprisingly neat. A bookshelf held more volumes than she would have expected, and a desk in the corner was covered with paper sketches and plans similar to the ones he'd shown her in town. "I've been implementing some of your suggestions," Isaac said quietly, noticing her gaze on his desk. "The south field is already marked for that orchard you mentioned." Before she could respond, Martha called her over to help with her father. For the next hour, they worked to make Walter comfortable while waiting for the doctor. The storm intensified, rattling the newly repaired roof and sending drafts through the cabin. "The stove's going out," Martha noted with concern. "We need more wood." "I'll get it," Isaac said, reaching for his coat. "I'll help," Tessa volunteered, ignoring her mother's disapproving look. The truth was, she needed a moment away from her father's pained groans and her mother's anxious hovering. Outside, the rain had lessened to a steady drizzle. They hurried to the woodpile stacked against the side of the barn. "You've done so much already," Tessa remarked, gathering smaller pieces while Isaac handled the larger logs. "This place is transformed from what I remember." "Still a long way to go," he replied, his voice almost lost in the rumble of distant thunder. "But it's taking shape. Your ideas helped more than you know." A gust of wind whipped around them, and Tessa shivered in her damp dress. Without hesitation, Isaac shrugged out of his coat and draped it around her shoulders. The wool was warm from his body, and the simple gesture of protection touched her deeply. "You'll catch cold," she protested weakly. "I'm used to worse," he assured her with a slight smile. "Texas summers make a man appreciate a cool rain." They gathered the wood in silence for a moment before Isaac spoke again, his voice different now, more hesitant. "Your father mentioned Henry Wilson again today. Said the arrangement is almost finalized." Tessa's head snapped up. "What?" "He said Wilson's offered a good price for the cattle and thrown in a marriage proposal as part of the deal." Isaac wasn't looking at her, his focus seemingly on the wood in his arms. "I thought perhaps you should know." Cold dread settled in Tessa's stomach, heavier than the damp wood in her arms. "He can't do that. I can't marry that man." "I told him as much," Isaac said quietly. "You did." Tessa stared at him in shock. "What did he say?" "He said I should mind my own business." A rueful smile touched Isaac's lips. "I told him that the happiness of a woman with your spirit and intelligence was everyone's business." Tessa's breath caught. No one had ever defended her dreams that way. "Why would you do that?" she whispered. Isaac finally looked at her directly, rain dripping from his dark hair onto his face. "Because I've met too many people who have had the life squeezed out of them by others' expectations. The light in your eyes when you talk about your plans, it shouldn't be extinguished." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition, a possibility opening like a flower at dawn. Tessa felt dizzy with it, aware of his nearness, of the rain falling around them, of the wild beating of her own heart. The sound of hoofbeats broke the spell. William had returned with Dr. Simmons. They hurried back inside with the firewood, the moment unfinished but not forgotten. Doc Simmons confirmed that Walter's leg was indeed broken but had been well set by Isaac. "You've done this before," he commented as he wrapped the leg more securely. "Once or twice," Isaac acknowledged. "Cattle drives teach a man all sorts of unexpected skills." The doctor prescribed rest and announced that Walter shouldn't be moved for at least 2 days. "That leg needs to set properly before he's jostled in a wagon." Martha looked around the small cabin with dismay. "But where will we all stay?" "William can take the wagon back to get supplies and clothes," Isaac suggested. "Mrs. Adams, you can take the bed with your husband. I'll sleep in the barn." "And Tessa?" Martha asked with narrowed eyes. "I can make up a pallet by the fire," Tessa volunteered quickly. The arrangement was far from ideal, but with the storm still raging outside and her father in no condition to travel, they had little choice. William departed with promises to return the next day with supplies and to check on Grace, who had remained at home. That night, after her parents had settled as comfortably as possible in the small bedroom, and the cabin had grown quiet except for the crackling fire, Tessa found herself unable to sleep. She sat up on her pallet, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders and staring into the flames. The cabin door opened quietly and Isaac slipped inside, bringing a gust of cool night air with him. He stopped short when he saw her awake. "I thought you'd be asleep," he said softly. "I just came to check the fire." "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. "Too many thoughts." He nodded in understanding, adding a log to the stove before settling onto a chair nearby. "Your father will be fine. He's strong." "It's not just that," she said, drawing her knees up to her chest beneath the blanket. "It's what you said earlier about Henry Wilson." Isaac's expression darkened. "I shouldn't have interfered." "No," she said quickly. "I'm glad you told me. I just don't know what to do. My father sees the match as practical. Wilson has money and our ranch is failing." "And what do you see?" "A prison," she whispered. "A life where every dream I've ever had withers and dies." The fire popped and hissed in the silence that followed. When Isaac finally spoke, his voice was low and intense. "What if there was another way?" "What do you mean?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Your drawings, your plans, they're not just dreams, Tessa. They're visions. Practical ones that could work." He gestured around the cabin. "This place, it's just beginning. I have the land, some cattle, and my savings. What I don't have is—" He hesitated, then continued, "a partner who sees what I see, who dreams what I dream." Tessa's heart thundered in her chest. "Are you suggesting—" "I'm suggesting that dreams are always better when shared," he said carefully. "That two people with the same vision can build something neither could alone." "My parents would never allow it," she whispered, though her mind was already racing ahead, seeing possibilities unfold like pages in a book. "I'm not talking about defying your parents," Isaac clarified. "I'm talking about showing them another path, a better one for everyone." They talked long into the night, their voices hushed conspirators' murmurs as they shared ideas, made plans, and dared to dream together. By the time Tessa finally drifted to sleep near dawn, something new had taken root in her heart, not just hope, but a fierce determination. The next 2 days passed in a blur of activity. William returned with supplies and stayed to help Isaac with the most pressing repairs to the cabin, making it more comfortable for their unexpected stay. Tessa and her mother tended to Walter, whose pain gradually subsided enough for his natural impatience to resurface. "I need to get back to my own place," he grumbled on the second afternoon. "The cattle need tending." "William has it well in hand," Martha assured him. "And Mr. Blackburn has been most accommodating." Indeed, Isaac had been the perfect host, giving up his cabin without complaint and working tirelessly to make them comfortable. Tessa watched him with new eyes now, seeing not just the quiet, capable man who had first intrigued her, but a potential future that had never seemed possible before. On the third morning, Doc Simmons declared Walter fit to travel if they took it slowly. As they prepared to leave, Isaac pulled Tessa aside while her parents were occupied with getting Walter settled in the wagon. "I meant what I said," he told her quietly. "Every word. Think about it." She nodded, unable to find words for the tumult of emotions inside her. "I will." Back at the Adams ranch, Tessa found herself increasingly restless. Her father's injury meant additional work fell to William and the women, but beyond the physical labor, Tessa's mind was consumed with the possibilities Isaac had laid before her. A week after returning home, the confrontation she'd been dreading finally came. Henry Wilson arrived for dinner, his smug smile and proprietary gaze making Tessa's skin crawl. After the meal, her father called her into his study, where Wilson waited with a small jewelry box. "Henry has something to ask you," Walter said, his tone making it clear this was less a question than a formality. Wilson stepped forward, opening the box to reveal a small gold band with a tiny pearl. "Tessa Adams, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" The words she'd rehearsed in her mind fled. She looked from Wilson's expectant face to her father's stern one, and something inside her solidified into certainty. "No," she said clearly. "I cannot marry you, Mr. Wilson." Her father's face flushed dark red. "Tessa, apologize immediately." "I won't apologize for speaking the truth," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I don't love Mr. Wilson, and I never will." "Love?" Wilson scoffed. "What has love to do with a practical arrangement? Your father needs this alliance. Your family needs my support." "My family needs new ideas more than they need your charity," Tessa countered. "We're failing because we refuse to adapt, not because we lack a benefactor." "That's enough," Walter roared, rising from his chair despite his splinted leg. "You will accept this proposal or you will leave this house." The ultimatum hung in the air between them. Tessa felt strangely calm, as if she'd been preparing for this moment her entire life. "Then I'll leave," she said quietly. Her mother gasped from the doorway where she'd been listening. "Tessa, you can't mean that." "I do." She turned to face her mother. "I won't live a life that smothers everything I am." "And where will you go?" her father demanded. "What will you do? No decent family will take in a daughter who defies her parents this way." Before Tessa could answer, another voice joined the conversation. "She can come with me." All heads turned to see Isaac Blackburn standing in the front doorway, hat in hand. William stood behind him, looking both worried and supportive. "I invited him," William explained quickly. "I thought we thought you should hear him out." "Hear what out?" Walter demanded. "What business is this of yours, Blackburn?" Isaac stepped fully into the room, his calm presence somehow filling the space. "Mr. Adams, I came to make you a business proposition, one that solves your immediate problems without requiring your daughter to sacrifice her future." Wilson puffed up indignantly. "Now see here, please." Isaac cut him off politely but firmly. "Hear me out before you decide." Walter sank back into his chair, waving a hand for Isaac to continue. For the next 15 minutes, Isaac laid out a plan so practical and detailed that even Walter's objections gradually subsided. He proposed a partnership between their ranches, combining resources, implementing new farming methods Tessa had researched, and diversifying their livestock. Isaac would provide capital for immediate improvements, while the Adams family would contribute their experience and labor. "The ranch stays in your family's name," Isaac concluded, "but we work together to make both properties thrive. Within 2 years, I believe we can triple your current productivity." Walter looked skeptical but intrigued. "And what do you get out of this arrangement?" Isaac's eyes flicked briefly to Tessa before returning to her father. "A fair percentage of the profits." "Knowledge I lack about this specific territory," and he paused. I would like your blessing to court your daughter properly, with marriage in mind if she'll have me." The room fell silent. Tessa felt as if her heart might burst from her chest. "You want to marry Tessa?" Martha asked, her voice faint with surprise. "Only if she wishes it," Isaac clarified. "But yes, that would be my hope." "This is preposterous," Wilson sputtered. "Adams, you can't seriously consider this upstart's offer over mine." Walter ignored him, his shrewd gaze assessing Isaac. "You've known my daughter for barely a month." "I've known her long enough to recognize her intelligence, her determination, and her vision," Isaac replied steadily. "Long enough to know that her dreams align with mine, and together we could build something remarkable. And if I refuse?" Walter challenged. Isaac's expression remained calm. "Then I'll wish you well and continue with my own plans, but I believe we'd all be poorer for the missed opportunity." Walter Adams was many things: stubborn, traditional, sometimes short-sighted, but he wasn't a fool. He glanced at his wife, then at William, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Wilson," he said finally, "I'm afraid we'll have to decline your offer." What followed was a flurry of outraged protests from Wilson, quiet calculation from Walter, practical questions from Martha, and barely contained excitement from Tessa. By the time Wilson stormed out and the family settled around the table with Isaac to discuss details, the world had shifted on its axis. "It won't be easy," Isaac warned as they walked the property later that afternoon, planning where new irrigation channels would go. "Starting something new never is." "I don't want easy," Tessa replied, her steps light with newfound freedom. "I want possible." He smiled down at her and for the first time took her hand in his. "Then we'll make it possible together." The courtship that followed was unlike any in the territory. Instead of socials and chaperoned walks, Tessa and Isaac spent their days working side by side, planting new crops, redesigning barns, and implementing the innovative methods she'd studied. He taught her to ride astride rather than side saddle, ignoring Martha's scandalized objections, and she taught him the hidden places on the Adams land where water flowed even in drought years. In the evenings, they pored over agricultural journals and sketched plans for both properties. Sometimes they read aloud to each other from his collection of books, poetry, and philosophy that opened new worlds beyond the physical one they were building. 2 months after Isaac's proposal to Walter, he made a different kind of proposal to Tessa. They had ridden to a hillside overlooking both properties, where the first signs of their joint efforts were becoming visible: new fencing, freshly plowed fields, the foundation of a larger barn rising from the earth. "It's really happening," Tessa marveled, dismounting to stand at the crest of the hill. "Everything we dreamed." "Not everything," Isaac said, joining her. "Not yet." He took her hands in his expression more serious than usual. "Tessa Adams, I promised your father I would court you properly, and I've tried. But I find myself growing more certain every day that my life would be incomplete without you as my partner in all things." He knelt before her, still holding her hands. "I'm not just asking you to be my wife. I'm asking you to continue being my partner in this dream we're building together. Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to Tessa's eyes, not the tears of defeat or frustration she'd known most of her life, but tears of joy so intense it almost hurt. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." He rose and kissed her then, a first kiss that held promises of 1,000 more to come. They were married that autumn in a simple ceremony attended by both families. Even Walter, seeing the transformation of his failing ranch under their combined efforts, had come to grudgingly respect his new son-in-law and the daughter whose dreams he'd once dismissed. The following spring found them living in the expanded cabin on Isaac's property, which they'd named Horizon Ranch. The original structure now formed the heart of a larger home, with a proper kitchen, a sitting room lined with bookshelves, and upstairs bedrooms with windows that caught the morning light. On a warm May morning, Isaac found Tessa on the porch, sketching new plans for a greenhouse. Her belly had just begun to round with their first child, a secret they were savoring for a few more weeks before sharing with their families. "Still dreaming?" he asked, settling beside her on the bench they'd built together. She smiled, leaning into his embrace. "Always. But now my dreams have somewhere to land." He placed a hand gently over the curve where their child grew. "And someone to inherit them." Tessa covered his hand with hers, remembering the lonely girl who had once sat on a stump in the moonlight, clutching a journal filled with impossible visions. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night, when you found me sketching behind the house?" "I said a lot of things," he chuckled. "I was trying desperately to impress you. You said, 'Dream with me.'" She turned to face him. "No one had ever said that to me before. Everyone else tried to wake me from my dreams. You invited me into yours." "Best invitation I ever extended," he murmured, kissing her forehead. "Best one I ever accepted," she replied. Below them, the ranch sprawled in the morning light, cattle grazing alongside a small flock of sheep, fields of wheat beginning to green, fruit trees blossoming in neat rows. Workers moved purposefully between buildings, including 2 women Tessa had hired to help with the dairy they'd established. In the distance, the Adams Ranch, now flourishing under William's management with their guidance, formed the other half of their growing enterprise. It wasn't just a home they'd built, but a vision made real. A place where dreams took solid form in timber and stone, in furrows of earth and the rhythms of daily life. A testament to what was possible when someone said, "Dream with me," and meant it with their whole heart. As summer ripened into autumn, their first child, a daughter they named Hope, arrived with the harvest. Tessa recovered quickly, eager to return to the work and life she loved. By Hope's first birthday, Horizon Ranch had become known throughout the territory for its innovative methods and consistent yields, despite challenging conditions. Visitors came to learn their techniques, cattle ranchers curious about crop rotation, farmers interested in their water conservation methods. Tessa, once laughed at for her impractical dreams, now found herself teaching others how to implement the very ideas her family had dismissed. "You should write a book," Isaac suggested one evening as they sat by the fire, Hope sleeping peacefully in her cradle nearby. "Share your methods more widely." "Our methods," Tessa corrected, but the idea took root. Throughout that winter, whenever time allowed, she worked on a practical guide to mixed farming in arid conditions. Isaac added sections on cattle management and building design, and by spring, they had a manuscript they sent to a publisher in Denver. To their surprise, Progressive Ranching for Western Territories was accepted for publication, appearing in print just before Hope's second birthday. The modest royalties weren't as important as the validation, concrete proof that their shared vision had value beyond their own land. The book brought new connections and opportunities. A representative from the Territorial Agricultural Board visited, impressed enough to invite them both to speak at the annual meeting in Cheyenne. Martha Adams, seeing her daughter stand confidently before a room of mostly male farmers and ranchers, explaining irrigation techniques with quiet authority, finally began to understand. "I never thought," she admitted to Tessa afterward. "I just wanted you to be safe. I didn't know women could do such things." "I'm still safe, Mother," Tessa assured her, "just in a different way than you imagined." By 1885, 7 years after Isaac had first ridden onto the Adams Ranch, Horizon had expanded to include a proper trading post where local farmers could sell their goods and purchase supplies, without the long journey to town. Managed by Tessa's younger sister Grace, who had discovered her own head for business, the store became another success in their growing enterprise. The family grew as well. After Hope came twins, a boy they named William after Tessa's brother, and a girl they called Faith. The children thrived in the environment. Their parents had created one where dreams were nurtured rather than dismissed, where innovation was valued above tradition for tradition's sake. One summer evening, as they sat on the expanded porch watching their children chase fireflies in the gathering dusk, Tessa was struck by how far they had come from that rainy night when possibilities had first opened between them. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if my father hadn't broken his leg that day?" she asked, leaning against Isaac's shoulder. "If we hadn't been forced to spend those days at your cabin, I'd have found another way," he said with quiet certainty. "I knew from the moment I saw your sketches that you were the partner I'd been looking for all my life. Even though I was just a rancher's headstrong daughter with impossible dreams, especially because of that." He turned to face her, his eyes still holding the same intensity they had the first time they'd met. "Your dreams were never impossible, Tessa. They just needed room to grow." She thought of her journal, that first one now carefully preserved in their library, alongside newer volumes filled with plans realized and dreams still taking shape. "We've built so much, and we're just beginning," he reminded her. "There's talk of statehood coming soon, new railways, the children growing up, more books to write, more dreams to dream," she added. As night settled fully over Horizon Ranch, Tessa Blackburn, once the girl whose family had laughed at her dreams, looked out at the home she and Isaac had built together. Not just the physical structures, though those were substantial now, but the life they'd created, one where dreams were currency, where possibility was the foundation, where the future stretched as wide and promising as the western sky above them. In the years that followed, that foundation would support them through droughts and blizzards, through economic downturns and personal losses. Their children would grow up understanding that dreams weren't frivolous things to be dismissed, but seeds to be carefully tended. Some would stay to continue building what their parents had begun. Others would carry the lessons learned at Horizon to distant places. But always, at the heart of it all, remained that moment of recognition between two dreamers, when one had the courage to say, "Dream with me," and the other found the strength to answer, "Yes."